Naval architect and marine engineer Sergio Cutolo set up Hydrotech in 1995. Since then, it's grown from being a pure engineering company into a full-on design studio with over 20 staff and some 25 projects on the go. In fact, if you strung them all together end to end, they'd stretch for over a kilometer. Sergio is very much associated with the growing market for compact explorer yachts with builders such as Cantiere della Marche, Rossetti Superyachts, and latterly Palumbo Superyachts with its 42-meter crossover project. And to talk about explorer yachts and more, Sergio is with us here today in the Boat Show studio. Welcome, Sergio.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the invitation.
The yacht that spawned a whole new generation, if you like, of compact explorer yachts was the Namocus 82 back in 2008, built by Cantiere di Pesaro. My first question is, what to your mind are the essential characteristics of an explorer yacht?
As you say, that was the first, and the most complicated thing was to put all the owner requirements into a small boat. And actually, I could repeat exactly, the brief I received from the client. So he wanted to have 4 cabins floating on a sea of fuel, because his first, request was about the range. So having a boat that was able to cross also the Atlantic Ocean, even if it was only 24 meters. The next was to have a big tender. Then, of course, the space on board was very important. He opted for one engine room. He said 99% of the ships that are around, they sail with one single engine, so he didn't see the reason to have 2 engines. And of course, he wanted a stable boat. So the boat became extremely compact in length, but with a very generous beam. It was really unusual for the time. It was amazing, to see compared to other boats of the same length, because the maximum beam was 7.2 meters. The boat was able to carry 35,000 liters of fuel, which gave a range of about 4,500 miles on a single engine. That was the other issue, because of course, most of the operators are used to the 2 engines, which of course give some advantage when you have to maneuver the boat in restricted waters. But basically, these are the requirements. For me, a small boat is mostly difficult. In a small boat is very difficult to bring all these features. Big boats, they have these features. So for a big explorer, we have different approach.
And the original owner had a very specific purpose for his yacht, didn't he?
Yeah, he was one of the first divers to visit the wreck of the Andrea Doria, and he wanted to go there with his own boat. Unfortunately, it took a little bit longer to build the boat, so we missed the appointment, but in any case, he enjoyed the boat crossing between Tunisia, Italy. Once he called me, he said, I'm crossing because I decided to come one day earlier because there is a gale, force 8 coming on the channel of Sicily. And I said, so you departed earlier to avoid it? No, I departed earlier to get it because I want to test the boat.
The Namocus led on to the very popular Darwin series with Cantiere della Marche, and then the Flexplorer, the first of which was Motor Aurelia, which has some pretty cool features. I'm thinking in particular of the A-frame crane made out of carbon fiber for launching tenders. But what's the next step for Explorer Yacht Design? I know, for example, that you have a futuristic Explorer concept called the Vanguard.
As I said before, growing in size is changing a little bit the target, basically. So, but the main things remain. So, for example, the need for a big tender. And here comes, the A-frame on Aurelia, because with a big tender, If you launch the tender on the side, I mean, you're having least problems. I mean, the bigger the tender, the more the boat will list. This was a specific requirement from the owner of Aurelia, who had the Darwin before, by the way. And he noticed that when he was launching the tender, the boat was listing on one side. So launching aft is preventing this phenomenon. So Aurelia can carry an 8-meter tender easily with 2.5 tons weight and launching it without problem, and even recovering the tender when the boat is going at very slow speed. So you will see A-frames on commercial boats. So again, we are borrowing concept from the commercial world. I think that big tenders need a lot of space, and the concept which is driving also a boat like the Vanguard is trying to use the space used by the tender when the tenders are not in that position. So the big deck of Aurelia, the big aft deck of Aurelia, is then perfectly usable when the tender is in the water or when the tender is towed, which is an option that many explorer owners like to use. And also on the Vanguard we have the tender area that can become a party area easily when the two tenders are in the water.
And of course it doesn't look necessarily like an Explorer, does it? The aesthetics change.
Yes, there are several reasons for this. One, the Explorer concept is starting to attract people who anyway like, a boat that is more design. They like more maybe the white yacht concept. But if you see this, I like to repeat sometimes, but this is a normal evolution which is happening also in cars. If you consider the old Defender and the new Defender. We are going more into a concept of crossover where actually the nautical qualities stay, the long range, big tenders, but you have to dress them in a more yachty style.
Of course, Hydrotec doesn't just design Explorer yachts, and you've worked on other projects with shipyards such as Barletta in Italy, Golden Yachts in Greece, Protection Turquoise as it used to be known in Turkey, and of course Palumbo super yachts, including 80-meter Dragon. What projects is the studio working on at the moment that are not Explorer yachts?
Right now we are working on an 80-meter and a completely new 80-meter yacht with ESA. I would say we just do the engineering, but it's not just because it's a big task. For a small company to deal with complete design, we get even into detailed engineering. We do nesting and piping on, but this is technical, let's say, work. The style is done by another designer. We are also working on two 66-meter, again with ESA, which have been announced recently, where again we do naval architecture engineering. And these are big boats. We have an aluminium 32-meter yacht called Veloce with Vittoria Yachts under construction. This is a spec boat. It's a semi-displacement raised pilot house, so it's something completely different than an Explorer. But I would say that in each of these projects there is a little bit of our Explorer experience. We never compromise with safety, with seakeeping. We look a lot for hull efficiency, so to keep the fuel consumption extremely low. And these are concepts that, we took from the Explorer concept, but that we bring on any boat we design.
I said in my introduction that Hydrotec has grown from being a pure engineering company into a full-blown design studio. And I suppose that begs the question, as a company, what do you do now, which you didn't do a few years ago?
We are pushing a lot, because we are widening the scope of supply of the company, both on the engineering side and let's say the architectural or design area. On the designing and architectural aspects, we go more and more into the design of exterior furniture. We are doing that on a couple of Cantiere delle Marche, and we even explored in a quite shy way the possibility to do something on the interior design, because, for example, Vittoria, for the two boats that are in the construction, the Bowsprit and Veloce, they asked us to, to represent a little bit the interior. Today, boats are, interior and exterior of the boats are very much connected.
And you have a working philosophy that you like to call creative naval architecture. Now, naval architects and marine engineers are not commonly thought of, perhaps wrongly, as creatives. They're more technicians. So what do you mean exactly by that slogan, creative naval architecture?
When we started with, let's say, the pure naval architecture and engineering, our dialogue with designers was always coming to a point where the designer wanted something that was, let's say, a bit difficult. They say, the architect dream is the engineer nightmare, and sometimes this is true. But we always try to have, a proactive approach to this kind of problems. So trying to help the designer to develop his concept without technical limitations. So if we could bend, let's say, the engineering in order to get a good result on the design, this was anyway a point that we always pushed for. So for me, it's a positive concept which we try to keep, and I think is appreciated by our clients.
You were one of the pioneers of hybrid propulsion on smaller super yachts with the 40-meter Columbus Sport Hybrid over a decade ago now, I think. Since then, there's been a lot of debate about hybrid propulsion and alternative fuels like methanol and hydrogen. What's your opinion of hybrid for super yachts, given their standard operational profile? Because they don't move around very much, do they?
No, but we are trying to transfer into the yachting, or anyway into the naval vehicles, some concepts that are coming from the automotive industry, and this is somehow wrong, because while in the automotive you have a lot of possibilities to recharge the batteries at zero cost, because of course you brake, you go downhill. The boat is moving on the sea surface and doesn't brake and doesn't go downhill. So anyway, if you want to recharge your batteries, you must have your engines on, or you must have solar panels, wind turbines, whatever you want. And you need to accumulate this energy into batteries. Of course, there are some alternative fuels, but the efficiency, especially related to the space, is not as much as what we have with fossil fuels. So for me, it's going to be a slow process, because the range requirements for yachts are such that it's difficult to cross an ocean on batteries or on alternative fuels due to the space storage. I believe a lot in hybrid. We see this hybrid concept already there in fast ferries, where actually they switch to electric when they enter in harbors. I think hybrid also between different fuels, so that you don't need to store all the hydrogen to cross the ocean. Or, for example, having a system that can generate hydrogen on board, but still 90% of the hydrogen we have is obtained by burning fossil fuels. So I think the right way is to leave the market and research free to find the solution, rather than trying to address the solution with the legislation.
As a boy growing up on the Sorrento coast near Naples, you were heavily into windsurfing and sailing, and we have a photograph here of you and your Speedos.
Yeah. Long time ago.
My last question has to be, when will we see a sailing yacht, perhaps a sailing explorer yacht from Hydrotec?
At the moment, we don't have anything on the table, but of course, you know, when I started to work with Baglietto, when I had my interview, I visited the yard, and there was Italia under construction, which was a 12-meter that then was sailing at the America's Cup in Fremantle in 1987. The passion for sailing and knowledge about sailing yachts was helping me anyway through my profession. I think sailing yachts, hulls are the most efficient ones, and because they have to move with very little power. So this was driving me anyway along my career. I'm not completely pessimistic about the possibility to build and it would be an explorer sailing yacht.
It would be an explorer sailing yacht. Yeah, fantastic. Sergio, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.